Welcome, strangers, to Talkumentary, a show where we watch documentaries and then get together and talk. Welcome, everyone, to the 49th episode of Talkumentary. That's right, we are almost 50 episodes old. Can you guys believe that?
Nope.
Feels like it's been just yesterday since we started this.
Yes.
It wasn't, but yeah, we just started this. Tonight, we are going to be looking into what I consider to maybe be one of the most frightening situations involving a family and their struggles with a healthcare system, a heartbreaking story that unfolds because of it. First, let me introduce our crew for the evening. With me tonight in the studio, in the Talkumentary den, none other than Bruce, and the juice is loose, Brice. What's up, Brice?
What is up is, things above us.
Yeah.
But
like the vaulted ceiling.
Yes, the vaulted ceiling.
Okay. Joining us tonight from over the waves of the internet. She is not with us in proximity, but she is with us in spirit. All the way from another state this time. Welcome back, Lady Katy.
So much.
Hi, friend.
I don't wish I was in the snow because I drove.
Yeah. Yeah, the weather in certain places has been pretty awful. My family and I did a little vacation to Colorado, and we had to drive in the snow a little bit, and it makes for a stressful drive. You know, we were fine, but it just you add a whole new level of stress as you're going. So, thanks for being here, Katy. Let's get a few things out of the way. Please go rate and review our podcast on your favorite podcast streaming service. Let us know what you think of our show. If you want to connect to our crew, look for @Talkumentary Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, or you can shoot us an email at info.talkumentary@gmail.com. This week, we stayed on the edge of our seats in this nerve-wracking and probably, in my opinion, one of the most terrifying ones that we've watched, just because it's so real and it happens so often. Also, one of the saddest by far. We followed the story of a family that tries desperately to understand 10-year-old Maya Kowalski's super rare illness and find proper care for her until they start to be questioned and accused of things themselves, resulting in Maya being taken into state custody. We watched a 103-minute documentary from 2023 titled Take Care of Maya. Here's the trailer.
We as parents tried to do the best we can for our children, but there's nothing that could prepare me for what I went through. Nothing. Beata and I had a beautiful family, but then Maya started to get sick.
Maya had advanced complex regional pain syndrome, and we know what the best therapy is for it. It's called ketamine.
We were just blessed that we finally seen something working, but Maya relapsed. Beata's explaining to the emergency room, this is what needs to be done.
You don't understand how much medication it takes to control her pain.
But they didn't listen.
They accused Beata of medical child abuse.
And that's when they told me I had to leave, that my daughter is under state custody.
They would try to convince me that my mom was doing things to me.
I do not want my child to suffer. She is still my child.
Our family was falling apart.
You're gonna cause more problems.
I'm fighting for my child. How should I feel?
No matter what we did, the court sided with the hospital staff.
Judges don't care about evidence.
You don't get to the truth by accepting what's in front of you without questioning it. And I realized that this was a lot bigger than just the Kowalskis.
How many times are you allowed to be wrong and destroy lives before they say, okay, that's enough?
These families walked in hoping for help for their child. and some of them walked out in handcuffs.
Wow. What a film. This was nerve-wracking from beginning to end. What were you guys, after listening to that again, being put back into the world of the Kowalskis, what do you guys think? What's Katie impressions, first impressions after your watch?
To know that such a debilitating disease can affect a child, that they have to suffer that like that, but your life can be so changed and affected by people who decide they're going to take over, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's terrifying.
It's so scary. So scary. Brice?
Oh, man. First, just the fear of trying to get the right diagnosis and all the trouble that they had to go through for that, to finally understanding it and having treatments, and then not being able to continue those and then revert back into that state.
Right. Yeah, it's really scary. This was directed by Henry Roosevelt, produced by Caitlin Keating. This film was a Story Syndicate and Wise. This was a Story Syndicate and Wise Fool production, distributed and streamed on Netflix. Take Care of Maya scores a whopping fresh 92% on Rotten Tomatoes with 13 critics' reviews and an audience score of 95% with over 250 audience ratings. Here's a few of the reviews that I read. A fresh review from someone named Chris Wagner of Rolling Stone says, quote, "Take Care of Maya allows you to feel the agony and anger of a nightmare from which they can't awaken. The film leaves a bitter taste, along with the hope that they eventually get the closure that the film knows it can't supply." And a rotten review from Natalia Winkleman of the New York Times says, "Take Care of Maya is grueling, but it is also oddly deficient, wanting for the precision and perspective essential to deriving insight from profound trauma." I find myself disagreeing with Natalia there. I don't think this was deficient at all, besides in the happy ending. I would have loved that, but life does not always give you a happy ending, which unfortunately that's what some documentaries are here to show us, unfortunately. Anyway, we're going to have a link with the credit information in the show notes. Let's get into it. Quick warning before we get into this episode. If you haven't seen the documentary and you want to see it, this is your spoiler alert. Also, there is some talk of suicide in this one. For no spoilers again, but that is a topic that is discussed in this episode. So if you still want to hang out, glad you're here. Let's talk about why we chose to watch Take Care of Maya this week. I was dealer for this week, and basically I wanted something new. This was a very recent documentary. This was something that rated very high when you Google search best documentaries of 2023. This is on most of those lists. So that's it. That's my reason for picking it. Had either of you seen this? Katie, had you heard of this, seen this? I know you're a little bit more up to date on some of the new stuff coming out than I am. I'm like the guy who remembers stuff from the 90s, and you're a little more up to date. Was this something you were aware of?
Heard about this case when it started, talking about how they were keeping away long before it became what it is now, and we'll talk about it later, what's happened since it's come out. I remember reading that they were keeping the parents away from the kid at the hospital, and it just shook me to my core. How can you their parents from their children when they're trying to make them better at a hospital? And I just for one second couldn't even fathom that a hospital was trying to do something right for them when this child was, and what kind of person could do. And it started in 2015, but they were talking about this case years ago. So this documentary took a long time to make, but they've been talking about it for a long time too.
Yeah, it took a long time to make, and it also took a very long time to conclude. And at the end of this documentary, we didn't even get a true conclusion. And I know there's been some updates since then, like Katie mentioned. So, and we'll get into those. But Brice, how about you? Was this new to you, or was this something that you were aware of?
Oh, this was brand new to me. I didn't even know, what the title, what it was going to be about exactly.
Yeah.
But it jumps right into it. And
was it anywhere near what you were like predicting? Take Care of Maya. Did you have any clue that did you?
Nope.
Yeah.
No.
You went into it blind. You didn't watch the trailer or nothing.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. That had to be a little shocking then, because I at least had watched the trailer before going into it, and so I knew kind of what to expect, not the details, but kind of. I can imagine that was probably like, "Ooh, what did I just get? What did Jeff just get me into?"
Yeah. I sat down to watch it and was like, we'll just start it and see how it's going, if I'm feeling it. But I couldn't really turn it off. So it was it does a really good job of bringing you in.
Yeah, for sure. As we watch documentaries and inundate ourselves into whether it's social media, news outlets, things like that, it seems like more and more we're being shown behind the curtain of some of the big institutions that we're supposed to be able to trust. We've covered several of those documentaries here, whether it's, police that you're supposed to be able to trust, or, the justice system, or whatever it may be. You're supposed to be able to trust them for your own well-being. And more we're being shown that there is always darkness behind every curtain. And they are often some of the most dangerous and life-altering things that we experience in our lives. It's not some slasher in the hallway, sure, or in the alleyway or whatever. You've got the stories of these horrible things like that, but more often than not, the horrors in your life come from the things you're supposed to be able to trust, whether it's, domestic violence, or violence from police officers, or, unfair treatment in the judicial system, or whatever it may be. And to me, that's one of the worst things that we have to contend with. I'll take my chances with a slasher in the alleyway any day over having to not be able to trust these systems that are supposed to have my well-being. This one focused on the healthcare system, and more specifically, the power that system has to take children away from their parents when an allegation is made against a parent, and that allegation doesn't have to be proven. That, Katie, I'm going to have to probably push questions towards you, just because you're over the airwaves, and it's probably harder to insert yourself because there may be a little bit of a delay here. But I'm interested in your opinion, or in your perspective, I guess, on if you have one, of the system not needing proof, but just a what do they call it, probable cause of this, and how much power they have. Did that strike you as shocking as it struck me?
Yeah, it was kind of astonishing, because when I was a teacher, I had a student that had a bite mark on her arm, and she told me after a bit of sitting down crying that it was her mother. And so I'm a mandatory reporter, and I told my principal, and they called the cops. And at the end of the day, she went home with her mom. And it didn't matter what she said or what policies we had. There was no one they could send her home with. They wouldn't put her up in foster care. They wouldn't protect her. Yeah. She made me down that she wasn't going to go home with her mom. And it's one of my biggest regrets. And so to see that need to prove abuse,
right,
to just say it out and they could take her from her parents, is astounding, because that's not the system before. So that just, to me, says they have a lot more power than what as teachers.
Yeah. And, I would hope that in the creation of giving this sort of authority to these systems and to these people and these doctors, the hope is that you can get that child to safety without having to cut through a bunch of red tape. I assume that that's why it's there, right? Because if Maya in this story was truly an abused young lady, then you wouldn't want to have to go through a bunch of red tape to keep her safe from her parents that are abusing her, right? But good Lord, there's got to be some better checks and balances than this, because in the story, which we're getting into, there was proof that they weren't doing anything wrong, and that proof was ignored. And it was more of it was another, just like what was the one we Dream Killer, the one that I did with my sister, the episode we did where they went to such great lengths to protect their original decision and protect their reputation, that it damaged a family beyond repair. And to me, that's very, very sad. So our documentary starts out with audio clips of people talking about how their lives had been ruined by the system. We hear about how some people would rather be shot than have their children take away, which, if you're a parent, you can understand that. And then we roll right into the Kowalski family. Lovely memories from the beginning of the family. Beata, a Polish immigrant whose tenacity and never give up attitude allowed her a lot of success in her life. And when she met Jack Kowalski, they fell in love, started trying to have children, and eventually, after some failed attempts, they had little Maya. And a few years later, they had a son named Kyle. Beata was a nurse. Jack was a retired firefighter, and they are doing pretty good. Things are going pretty good for the Kowalski family. So, Brice, talk to me about the beginning of this film. You went into this film without knowing what was coming, with the exception of those clips at the beginning when they said, I don't want my kids taken from me. And then we roll into the Kowalski family, the happy, normal, everyday family from Florida. And, immigrant mom, firefighter dad, pretty good thing.
Yeah.
How were you feeling at that point?
Oh, I felt great for a while.
Yeah.
Because they set the stage really well. They introduce all the family members, and they talk about, they had to try to have Maya.
Right.
But they didn't have to try when they had Kyle. It's just
he just came whoops.
Yep, there he was.
Yep. But I would imagine, like me, you probably heard the stuff at the beginning, and you knew that this wasn't going to stay sunshine and rainbows,
right?
And so you've got. There's something so ominous about seeing the beginning parts of a show where you're going, oh, I just want it to stay happy like this, because I know it's not going to. Katie, were you feeling that too?
Like in a horror movie, when the family's all happy to a new house and everything's going great, and then slowly.
Your audio cut out just a little bit. You said slowly what happens?
Like in a horror movie,
yeah,
when the family moves into a house and everything's happy, somebody's got a job and the kids are great. And then slowly you watch it all fall apart as some ghost comes out of the wall.
Yeah. We knew something bad was going to happen here, and it sure did.
I just wanted to live in that happy moment of this montage of family photos.
Hey, can we go back to that and stay there for a while?
Yeah.
In 2015, though, Maya started to get sick. She starts having a lot of pain all over her body, in her arms, legs, feet. She can't move very efficiently. Her legs start to turn in. She's having a lot of congestion, breathing problems, respiratory infections, headaches, blurred vision, warm skin. Brice and Katy, neither of you are parents yet, but what do you think would be your first reaction if this sort of thing starts happening to your kid? Without having seen this documentary, Katy, what do you do if your little cat that's back there? What if Cat gets sick, or if you are a parent someday?
Katy's been through a lot, and so if my kid's instinct is to go get help and find out what's wrong, and you would listen to whatever the doctor said, because obviously they know more than you.
Right.
So if your doctor is sick in this, then you do it.
Right. Brice, I mean, that's your knee-jerk reaction, right? Call medical.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to fix my car, so I take it to a mechanic.
Right.
Like, if it's a child, then yeah, definitely take it to a professional
yeah.
doctor.
Right. Yeah. They did the same thing. They start taking her to doctors. They say, you know, and doctors all over the place. They're going because no one seemed to have any idea. It wasn't like they were getting answers they just didn't like.
Right.
They weren't getting any answers.
Mm-hmm.
They were going, my child's in pain, and we're getting
throwing their hands up.
I don't know. And, you know, Beata, being the nurse that she is and understanding how a lot of this works, she starts documenting everything. She's, you know, taking audio recordings. She's writing things down. She's taking video, which later in this story proves to be a very good thing. And after searching and searching and searching, they finally come across a doctor, Dr. Anthony Kirkpatrick, who without hesitation says he knows what she's suffering from. And that is a condition known as CRPS, or complex regional pain syndrome. Had either of you ever heard of CRPS?
Nope.
No, me neither. Here's a little clip about what CRPS is.
When I first saw the Kowalskis in September 2015, it was obvious what the problem was with Maya. It was clear and simple: CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome.
This videotape has been prepared in consultation with Dr. Anthony Kirkpatrick.
What is complex regional pain syndrome? The best way to think about it is the way it evolves. Let's say you have an injury. You know that probably in a week or two, the pain's going to go down, the swelling's going to go down, the redness and all that's going to go down. But what happens in these patients with CRPS is that it actually intensifies over that period of time.
Published case studies indicate that the incidence of CRPS increases dramatically between 9 and 11 years old, and it is found predominantly in young girls.
The patients describe it primarily as a burning sensation, that their skin becomes exquisitely sensitive to light touch.
Picture a floating feather, soft to our touch. Patients say this feels more like a knife stabbing their body.
The syndrome was first described over 100 years ago, but it was only recognized in modern medicine in the 1990s. Still, many don't know the problem exists, and many of those suffering were told the problem was psychological and imagined.
After my initial evaluation for Maya, it was clear to me that because of the magnitude of her symptoms, the lesions, this burning sensation in her legs, and the pain throughout her entire body, that Maya had advanced CRPS that we had to right away get aggressive with and get under control.
So this is a condition that had been around for a very long time, like they said, and was only treated as a psychological issue for quite some time, as if it were something that patients were essentially dreaming up or creating inside their own heads. And that's such a scary thing to say and to assume, because unfortunately, our brains are a very, 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 very powerful thing, and we can convince ourselves of things. But from where I'm sitting, it doesn't matter. If you're feeling those things, whether it's a psychological issue or not, the issues of our brain and of our mental health are just as important as any of our physical ailments. And if that's playing on itself, then we still deserve, treatment of some sort. And, Dr. Kirkpatrick then goes into the very effective drug that treats it, and that is called ketamine. Ketamine. So that's right. Cat tranquilizer, cat Valium, Jet K, Kit Kat, Purple, Special K, Special La Coke, Super Acid, Super K, Vitamin K, ketamine. Those are the street names for it if you guys aren't hip enough.
I'm not, but now
you are. If anyone says, I need some Jet K, you can be like, well, go talk to my veterinarian, because it's often used and abused recreationally because of it causes hallucinations. It causes you to feel disconnected, not being in control, as well as a state of being calm and relaxed, and a relief from pain. correction, it's not a relief from pain, but from what I read about it, it's more of a detachment from your pain. So when you stop caring as much about being in pain. Katie, were you saying something? There's a little bit of a delay on our audio, so.
I was just going to add that when the doctor says, oh, it could be psychological, that's a very common thing that I know women are used to hearing when they talk about pain. Say, oh, it's probably just in your head. You're probably just doing it to yourself. Yeah. And I think that's unique. They would start with that with a 9 to 11-year-old. This pain is in your head. She doesn't know how to do that. She doesn't understand how that works. This pain is very real to her. And even if it was somehow connected to a psychological disorder in her head, her pain is still.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I completely agree. And regardless of whether that's your assumption or not, you treat it, you know?
Yeah.
Good.
And I mean, the lesions and the legs turning in, like that's not in your head. That's physical. Yeah. It's coming from somewhere.
Yeah. I didn't fake this lesion. I didn't fake my legs turning in. I didn't, yeah. What, anyway, ketamine, though, is truly a medical drug. It's not just a recreational thing. And if used properly, can help many things, CPRS being one of those things. Kirkpatrick basically says that ketamine stimulates the brain, resets everything, increases circulation and breathing and blood pressure, all things that Maya very much needed. And they tried her at a low dose, as you would, and that wasn't helping. So they decide she needs a medically induced ketamine coma. A 5 to 6 day coma procedure that basically amps up her body on ketamine. And then when she wakes up, the hope is that she feels a lot better because her body is completely and totally reset. It's almost, I took it as like when your computer's acting up and you can't figure out why, you turn it off and then turn it back on. That's essentially what it felt like. And, however, it's an experimental treatment and it's only available in Mexico. Okay. This is where my red flags as a parent would start going off. I feel like if I was told you got to go to Mexico for this experimental ketamine coma, I might be more hesitant than what it seemed like the Kowalskis were. Katie, thoughts on that?
No, I had new drugs for migraines. When my grandma we wanted to be an experimental drug trial. If it's experimental, doesn't work or that it hasn't been through drug trials, but the FDA to regulate it needs a lot of different things. And just because the FDA doesn't regulate it doesn't mean it isn't safe. It's also, what did we say in that one documentary? It's the Food and Drug Administration, not administration. And they get paid off for a lot of different. So I guess if it's not approved, if it's still in those stages and a doctor told me that it would work, I would trust that doctor. I mean, I would do my own research, obviously, like this family has done, but I would be okay going to Mexico to get a treatment that could help my daughter. So
fair enough. That's a good that's good insight there. I know when I was watching it, and to me, I went, ooh, that doesn't sound too safe. It's interesting to hear it the way that you put it, though, because that makes total sense to me too. It's a lot easier if they say, it's a experimental or it's a treatment that only a few doctors know how to do, and they're at the Mayo Clinic, so you got to go there. Well, okay, to me that feels less risky than going, it's a experimental treatment that we don't do in the United States and you've got to go somewhere else. Yeah, I'm going to consider it, but man, I just felt like there was no hesitation there, which, maybe Beata knew something that, about this, or it was just very trusting. So,
yeah, I mean, you're watching your kid in this health just degenerate, and you're given the choice of try this or continue to watch health degenerate, because all the other doctors are throwing their hands up saying, we don't know. Yeah. So, tough choice, but
they end up going to Mexico and they get the coma treatment. She comes out of it. Obviously it was kind of scary watching her come out of it. She had the shakes. He was calling it the wiggles. but it ultimately was a huge success. She goes back home, she starts to feel better. She starts, they're still giving her ketamine treatments. And I know at one point she was feeling better and she was doing like kind of pull-ups or, push-up kind of things on her walker or something. And her mom's like, you're going to need an extra dose of ketamine after this, because you're going to be sore. But, Dr. Kirkpatrick's still, giving them prescriptions for ketamine. And he eventually has to pass them off to his colleague, Dr. Hanna, because Dr. Kirkpatrick was too expensive and didn't accept their insurance and whatnot. But things are going pretty well. And, that had to have been that right there, I think, is the reason that as we move forward in this story, that they were so sure of themselves, that Beata was so sure what her daughter needed, because they had seen the transformation. They had seen it. They weren't just guessing. They'd seen, several months. I'm trying to remember when they went to Mexico versus when she had her relapse in 2015 or 16. Was it 15 or 16? October, Hurricane Matthew. Anyway, it doesn't really matter too much for the story, but things are going great until October. I have 2016 on my notes, so maybe that's right. Anyway,
that sounds right.
Yeah. Hurricane Matthew hits. Has nothing to do, I don't think, with the relapse, but it's just the timing of the story. Maya has a huge relapse, and the family decides they have to take her into the hospital. This is a decision that they regret for the rest of their lives, because they take her to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. They go.
Seems like a good plan. The hospital name is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. I mean, some of the biggest. That's one of the biggest names in medical research and progress. And why wouldn't you trust that? And but they get there, and none of the nurses in the emergency room or the triage even know what CPRS is, which is concerning. And thankfully, thankfully, Beata is a no bullshit mother. And she's a nurse who knows exactly what her daughter needs. And she starts stating these things very aggressively to staff. And that's kind of what got her into, I think, some hot water, because that is sort of what is stated throughout this whole story. If you watch the documentary, this. But when a doctor or nurse who isn't familiar with this treatment plan sees that Beata and the family have been giving her so much of a drug like ketamine for symptoms that a lot of medical professionals still consider to maybe be a psychological thing, the hospital's red flags start going off, right? And they start to question the parents, right? So I can understand the questioning of the parents if you're not feeling comfortable with what's going on, but the accusations and the what happens after that's what doesn't make sense.
Right.
But unfortunately, when they start to question the parents, this sends Beata into a bit of a tirade, because they aren't helping her suffering daughter. And Jack and Beata start talking about taking Maya out of the hospital and taking her somewhere else. Well, of course, this causes the hospital to say, well, you're not leaving here with her. We're calling CPS, Child Protective Services. Enter the Honorable Dr. Sally Marie Smith, a pediatric physician with CPS who was given Maya's case. Oh boy, Sally Smith, the villain of this show, in my opinion, or at least one of them.
One of them, yeah.
Right. Before we go any further, I'm curious, did you guys at any point, at this point or any point in this documentary, start to question the story and what Beata was doing at all? Brice?
Question the story as
far
as...
Did you have any doubt about like whether Dr. Kirkpatrick was kind of a quack and that mom was way too quick with ketamine or giving her too much? Or did you think that like we were maybe being thought to believe mom was doing right, but we were going to turn into like mom was actually doing something really not cool?
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, we got to see the effects of the treatment, and she was able to raise her arm and put it behind her head that she wasn't able to before. She was going back to school, and
right,
and things were turning around.
So not really.
Yeah, moms are aggressive
They can
when
be.
their kids are in pain.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I was on Beata's side.
Yeah, Katie, I saw you shaking your head no to that. You were team Beata all the way, huh?
A mom fighting for their kid is a lion. And she watched her daughter suffer for so long before they found anything that made her feel better. And I'm sure as a parent, you would say you'd rather suffer for your child than watch them suffer.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure that's all she wanted to do, was to take that pain away. So then to watch her get this treatment and finally feel relief and be able to go to school and move, even to walk, was just such a relief, so uplifting. And to have that cure and maybe not cure, but a treatment that works, and to walk into a new hospital that doesn't believe you, that doesn't understand what's happening, the very first thing that I would do would be, okay, here are our results. Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Here are our results. This is what our doctor did. And guess what? It worked. It doesn't matter if you haven't been studying your periodicals, if you haven't been reading up on these chronic diseases that happen to kids, because I already know what works. So here it is. And this is what you're going to do. And she's going to do everything she needs to take care of her kid. And the first person that walks in her way and says no is going to get run over. So
for sure. Yeah. I agree with both of you, and with the way Beata was behaving and all that, to an extent. I do think that had she gone about things a little differently, the result may have been a little different too, but that's not to blame her. That's not to anything like that, because she was dealing with the in the moment, and she was doing things the way that she felt she needed to do it. But I will say that this was the part in the documentary where I started to question whether we as the viewers were being led to believe one thing and then we were going to get a big twist or something like that, because I didn't know this story beforehand. So I was going, oh boy, I really hope that it doesn't turn out that Beata was doing something, because we've seen the stories of Munchausen by proxy, and we've seen the documentaries where it turns out the mother was stirring lead into the kids' drinks or whatever. And what was that, Katie?
Oh, I was just saying you're right. It was doing like maybe documentarians were doing a bait and switch.
Yeah.
Very possible.
Yeah. So I started to get skeptical of what we were being led to believe. With as sad as the story is, I'm glad that I was wrong about that. But anyway, so Dr. Sally Smith, she goes in to talk to Maya and Jack. She doesn't identify herself. She starts asking questions for a whole 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is, plenty of time to get to know what's going on. That's sarcasm. In this time, she comes to the conclusion that despite the statements by Dr. Kirkpatrick and Dr. Hanna, two renowned physicians in their own right, that this is a case of Munchausen by proxy or medical child abuse, and she's putting all the blame on Beata. So this woman, to me, this should have all been over when they called Dr. Kirkpatrick and Dr. Hanna. This should have all ended.
Right.
They should have given care to her primary or her specialist, who is Dr. Hanna and Dr. Kirkpatrick, and they should have been the ones to say, no, the parents have done nothing wrong. This is exactly what we prescribed and what we've told them is the treatment. So you will not do that. I don't understand how they didn't have more of a say in this, because that right there is proof that they didn't do anything wrong.
And I mean, Dr. Kirkpatrick, he had the video of before and after. Like, you can see, like, the progression of getting better.
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, that was totally whack, for lack of a better term.
Whack.
I'm going to play a clip real quick. This is when Jack is told he has to leave Maya because she's now under state custody.
She did a 10-minute interview at most, and shortly after, she walks out.
There was ample evidence to support a diagnosis of medical child abuse, and it appeared most likely that Mrs. Kowalski was the primary one who was perpetrating the child abuse.
The nurse walks back in that was helping me. She told me I had to leave, that my daughter is under state custody. I remember looking in my daughter's eyes, and she's looking at me. I'm wondering if I would ever see her again.
So now what? What do you do in a situation like that? As a father, as a mother, as a sibling, as a friend, what do you do? What do you do?
Plan an escape.
Right. Yeah. Jailbreak. Yeah. I mean, what the Kowalskis did was what I think a lot of people would do is they immediately lawyer up. They say, I need legal representation because this might be more than what I can argue. I can't. Beata's done her damnedest to argue with the doctors and the nurses to give her, that custody. And they decide, it's time to lawyer up. And I think that was a good call. They find lawyer Deborah Salisbury, named after the steak.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe. Who basically tells them how much power CPS investigators have to take children away. And like we said earlier, they only have to give probable cause, not proof of abuse. And what a load of horse shit. Like we talked about, I understand the need to get rid of some of that red tape for the immediate care of a child. I get that. But man, they accuse them of over-medicating, of doctor shopping. So when they earlier were going around and trying to find specialists that could tell them what was wrong with their daughters rather than, I don't know what to do. They called that doctor shopping. Well, that's not what it was. And the lawyers believe that, like what Katie was saying, when Beata, the mother lion, goes into the hospital and doesn't let anyone stand in her way and is, we heard her recordings of her basically calling them assholes, basically calling them witches and liars. She offended someone. The lawyers believe that this whole thing stemmed from Beata having offended someone at that hospital. And, whether it was Dr. Smith.
People are
Go ahead, Katie. I'm sorry.
It comes at the wrong time. I just said people are petty bitches.
Yeah, they really are, especially when you're a professional in a field and you think that you're untouchable and you think that, your word is, your ego gets in the way of a lot of things. And when this irate mother comes at you saying you don't know what you're doing and I do, somebody went and got all up in their shit. And again, this all continues even though Dr. Kirkpatrick gave a statement to Dr. Smith saying they aren't doing anything wrong. This was prescribed to Maya. Sally Marie Smith sounds like a real bitch.
I think she might be.
I think she might be. I'm not a big fan of Sally Smith. At least not from what I can tell from.
I think the world would agree.
Yeah, I think they would. I think they would agree. As could be expected in a situation like this, the situation puts some serious strain, unfortunately, on Jack and Beata's relationship. Their daughter is imprisoned in a hospital where she isn't allowed to talk to them, see them, or anything. And Beata is basically banging down the doors of the hospital, demanding to be able to see her and that they give her daughter what she needs. Jack, on the other hand, is trying to play a little bit more of a compliant role and follow what the orders are so they can get back to seeing their daughter. He's saying, if we keep being aggressive about this, it's just going to be used against us and it's going to make this take even longer, which I can see both sides to that argument. I can see Jack wanting to say, hold on, calm down. We need to comply because we need to get back in that room with Maya. And Mom saying, no, these motherfuckers don't, understand my daughter and I'm going to fight for them. I understand both those sides so well. So I get it on both sides. But it does cause a rift between a man and his wife, I'm sure. Or a woman and her husband, however you want to phrase that. Anyway, Beata's calling the nurses witches, liars, assholes, and even their attorneys are telling her to calm down because it's just hurting their case the more irate she gets. This all leads to a shelter hearing, which is basically when a judge will decide where the child goes for the time being, and the judge ends up giving a no contact order between Beata and Maya, which this is when Beata falls out in the court hearing. She completely passes out and hits her head on the ground, and a really sad part to listen to. But Beata, being Beata, still fights. I really like her name, by the way.
Yeah.
Beata is such a good name, and it's like very easy to say, and it sounds so like powerful. I like the name Beata.
It's a good name.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks so. We listen. So a really cool part of this documentary is that we get a lot of audio clips that Beata had recorded. So it's not just, being told the story of the conversations that happened. You're hearing the actual conversations, which to me is everything. I love hearing the actual conversations or seeing the actual footage. The child parent advocacy people are telling Beata to stop trying to prove that the hospital did wrong. At this point, the courts don't care. It's already happened. Whatever happened has happened. The courts only care at this point about making sure that if they give that child back to Beata and Jack, that they're not going to end up regretting that because the parent goes off and kills the kid or something like that, because that looks bad on the system, right? So whether or not the hospital did something wrong, at this point, they're saying it doesn't matter, because what you have to do now is prove that you're not, you have to try to prove that you're not a risk to that child, right? And you getting all up in arms now, trying to get into that hospital room, it's showing that you might not be a stable person for her to be with. And Beata says, I understand, but I'm going to keep being aggressive because my child's in there not getting the care she needs. Mm-hmm. God, what an awful place to be in. Being told that what you're fighting for and all that, you need to stop fighting so hard because it's making you look bad. Like, I don't give a shit if I look bad. I want my daughter back. I want her to get the care. Even if I don't get my daughter back, I want her getting the care she needs. Even if I don't get to see her right now, this isn't about me. This is about Maya getting the care she needs, and what are we feeling at this point, Katie? Like when Beata just keeps getting told, you can't be in there. You're not going to see your daughter. You can't be involved in her care. And when you do talk to her, you can't talk about anything. You're going to have Kathy Beatty listening in and, mom, roll it back, mom. Stop calling me mom. I'm not your mom.
Yeah, that was a really annoying part.
Ugh. Katie?
Was this the hearing when the judge said, where she asked if she could have a daughter and the judge said no?
Not quite yet. This was the first hearing when they were deciding where they were going to where they gave the no contact order between Beata and Maya. This was like their first time in front of a judge.
I think if you have a vicious animal that is trying to get somewhere and you put it in a cage, it's not going to stop being vicious. It's just going to start frothing at the mouth and keep chewing at the bars until it dies. And that's essentially,
yeah,
you know,
that's a good way to, you know, not good. That's a accurate way to compare. Yeah. Because that is exactly what ends up, happening. You know, during all of this, we're getting like some testimony from other things and like text messages. I don't know if these were real text messages that they were showing. We're led to believe that they are, right?
Yeah.
And all it said was, you know, between a doctor and Dr. Smith, or between doctor number 1 and doctor number 2, you know, there's these text messages that they're showing, which was a really cool way to keep a documentary interesting, to show images like that throughout. I thought that was well done. But they're basically showing that these doctors at the hospital don't fully believe that Maya's actually sick, that her mother's a whack job, and that Maya being in their care is making her better. They're claiming that they see Maya using her feet, you know, when nobody's looking, kind of deal. They say that a 10-year-old can't keep up a charade 24/7, you know, and they had cameras on her the whole time. They start saying that she's moving around better, gaining weight, and weaning off medicines and everything. And Maya and Jack are claiming she's not getting better. They're saying some days are better than others, sure, but that's nothing new. This is just me, you know, dealing with my pain better and worse on different days depending on the day. And you know, tomorrow I might not be able to move at all, or whatever it may be.
And they're not really looking for evidence. They have a theory and they're looking for proof to support that theory. It's confirmation bias.
Absolutely.
So they're not really doing anything helpful.
Right. Because if they were to for any minute start believing that what Maya and Beata and Jack are saying is true, then they made a big fuck up. And
right.
So you're one, like you said, confirmation bias, where, you know, we made this call. We need to look for all the reasons why this was a right call. And, you know, rather than trying to. So we hear again from Dr. Kirkpatrick, who actually, he writes a letter to Beata, which really doesn't do anything to calm her down, because, you know, it causes her to actually go even harder at this. He writes her this letter telling her, Beata, you are absolutely correct to be fighting this. He says that the diagnosis of a, quote, fictitious disorder is a way for the hospital to conceal their incompetence. He tells her that this will lead to a prolonged and unbearably painful death for Maya. You know, you get a letter like that from your doctor, the only doctor who's ever really helped Maya, who says it is fucked up what that hospital is doing to your family and to Maya, and she will die, and she will die painfully if she doesn't get out of there and get the treatment she needs. Oh boy, how do you handle a letter like that? You know, like that. I don't know how you do.
Yeah, what can you even do with that information?
I mean, I guarantee you that if Beata had found out a way to, you know, like ninja sneak into the hospital and sneak her daughter out of there and take her to Mexico and hide for the rest of their lives, that she would have done it. There's no doubt in my mind that if she could have figured out how to do that and keep Maya safe, whether she was running from the law or not, she wouldn't have cared. You know, she seems like that kind of a mother to me.
I think even when the system is so terribly wrong, you still somewhat believe that it will turn around and things will be righted.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that was also part of not
probably
pulling the fire alarm and throwing smoke bombs down the hall and
going in like Deadpool or something like that, and crashing through the window and but you're right. I think that's a good point. Like, she is a part of the medical system. She, you know, she's hoping that through whatever, that they're going to realize that they were wrong and that she was right, not for the sake of saying I'm right, you're wrong, but because, you know, it's putting trust in a system that was made to help people. and it's not helping right now. Anyway, we then meet social worker assigned to Maya, Kathy Beatty. She's a real annoying. See you next Tuesday. They find out that they just do a simple Google search of her, and they find out that she was arrested for child abuse at one point in her life. Did you read the little letter that was on the screen?
You should not be allowed to work with children after that.
How are you a child social worker that's been arrested for child abuse?
Only because the case got dropped. So,
yeah, see this.
Oh, I was going to say, you have to be fingerprinted by the FBI and the police department when you become a teacher.
Yeah. See, but Maya claims that Kathy Beatty was telling her things like, you're going to be in foster homes, and your mother was going to a mental institution, and I'm going to end up adopting you.
Yeah.
She was the worst, probably, you've got villains in this story, right?
Mm-hmm.
If Sally Smith is the Joker, this Kathy Beatty is Two-Face or the Riddler or something like that, because she's just as maniacal and much creepier, because she ended up forcing Maya to strip down to her bra and shorts and take pictures, even though she was protesting. Maya was protesting, claiming that if you want to get your hearing, you need to take these pictures. And
yeah, if you want to go to the hearing.
Right. Yeah. And she admits to never having gotten permission to take these pictures. Never, she admits to having Maya on her lap and giving her hugs and things like, oh, my skin is crawling now, reliving that, let alone how they must have been feeling after that. It was so gross. And, the fact that after all of this, no one ever really had to pay any consequences besides some money to this family because of this. I mean,
Nobody went to jail.
You should be in prison.
Yeah.
That is wrong. That is wrong on so many levels. So Maya's still in the hospital.
Well,
go ahead.
Let's take a side trip for a second and think about all the people, all the kids that are in foster care that they're trying to reunite with their families. And these kids get killed by their parents. They get pulled out for possible child abuse, and then they end up back in the same home with their parents. And we hear about these kids that get killed by their parents, babies that are killed by their parents, and they get pulled out for possible child abuse when the teacher reports it, but it doesn't matter, and they get put back in the house. So what is the difference here between kids at home with their parents and now a hospital? Is it just the power that the hospital has? Is that the big difference?
Oh, God.
That could be.
Yeah, that's everything's jacked up. I hate it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maya's in this hospital and time is passing. Christmas, birthdays, other family things are happening. She's praying to go home. Her mom's telling her to be strong and they'll be together again soon. And at this point in the documentary, we hadn't heard anything besides recordings and videos from Beata. Well, that doesn't bode well. I'm expecting at some point to hear from her in an orange jumpsuit or something like that, like she got put in prison or something. I didn't know what had happened in this story. But we're about to find out why we hadn't heard from her. There's a court hearing to try to allow Maya to go back to her parents' custody, and it is denied. And at this point, the attorney asks, would it be all right for Maya to at least give her mother a hug? And the judge very coldly says, not at this time. It's not okay. This is the decision that very possibly was a straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. Because soon after this, Jack and his son Kyle attend a birthday party to which Beata stayed home, claiming she had a headache. Shortly after getting home, they find her in the garage. She had hanged herself. The judge denied her that hug and it killed her. It's such a sad, heavy part of this documentary. Watching Jack struggle with how his relationship with Beata had been, you know, his part in these investigations, his guilt, and ultimately, how do I tell my daughter that her mother, that she never got to say goodbye to in the hospital, because when they found out the mom wasn't at the hospital, her mom ended her own life. And in a lot of ways, they believe that this was because Beata felt that the only way that Maya's ever going to be released is if I'm not in the picture anymore. She had convinced herself in one way or another that it would be in Maya's best interest if I was no longer this problem. God, how sad is that? I don't even know, like, but you could understand how months and months and months of this mental and physical torture cause a person to start to doubt themselves, cause a person to start to wonder what they can do and what is in their control. And unfortunately, this was something that was within her control.
And the hospital staff are calling her and telling her she is the problem.
Right.
She's been told she's been the problem since the very beginning, and she carries that with her while she tries to save her kid, and she can't. And you're right. I think that added up to her thinking for a very long time that the only thing she could do to save her daughter was not be around anymore.
Right.
And that's just hard.
It's so heartbreaking. And, you know, Beata left a few emails before she went. And first she sends an email to Judge Hayworth. This is the judge that denied her the simple hug. She says, "Your heart is made out of iceberg. By taking the side of ACH and DCF, you have destroyed my family, my marriage. You have put us in bankruptcy, and you still denied me to see my daughter in court today. Further, you let them continue to destroy her even more, slowly each day. My daughter will never be who she was before October 13th, 2016. I hope you will take responsibility for, quote, my daughter's physical deconditioning, worsening of her CRPS, and eventually lead to her slow, painful death." She quoted Dr. Kirkpatrick, saying that you, Judge Hayworth, are responsible for what Dr. Kirkpatrick says is inevitable. She wanted Maya out of the hospital so bad she somehow convinced herself this was the way to make it happen. She also wrote an email to her family. It said, "Please take care of Maya," which is where we get the title of the documentary, "and tell her how much I love her every day. Please tell Kyle also that I love him very much, and I hope that he grows up to be a strong, good man, has great future, and stays close to God. I'm sorry, but I no longer can take the pain of being away from Maya and being treated like a criminal. I cannot watch my daughter suffer in pain and keep getting worse. It's been 3 months today of Maya not being home. I love you all. Beata." You know, probably one of the saddest parts of this whole situation to me was Beata's suicide was seen by some of these doctors at the hospital as being an admission of guilt in some way, reinforcing the fact that they responded the right way to this situation. We get some more of those text messages we saw earlier, them saying, "Well, see, we've seen this before. We made the right decision, blah, blah, blah." Kind of a silver lining, I guess you would say. And the way I saw it, something that made Beata's death feel a little less meaningless, I guess, is that this did cause the courts to allow Jack to take Maya to another specialist in Rhode Island. So for as heartbreakingly sad as this was, ultimately what Beata wanted happened after she died. And because of her death, it caused them to get another opinion, which they already had another opinion, actually 2 other opinions with Kirkpatrick and Hannah, but they didn't want to listen to those ones. When this doctor in Rhode Island evaluated Maya, he gave an unbiased diagnosis of CRPS. the same thing that Dr. Kirkpatrick had diagnosed her with, and that all the other people in the hospital were convinced was fake. And because of that, Maya was released to Jack's custody shortly after. But we're not done yet.
Mm-hmm.
Jack had to follow some pretty strict court instructions about Maya's care after she got home. They had to stop ketamine treatments for some reason, which I don't really understand. They had to do years of physical therapy, and ultimately Maya stays in a lot of pain. But thankfully, as she gets older and time goes on, she starts to get back on her feet, begins moving around better and being able to function better. You know, in the original, when we listened to the clip about what CRPS is, it said it affects, most often it affects girls between, I think it was 9 and 11, which was where she was, and she's starting to get a little bit older. I don't want to say that she starts to grow out of it a little bit, but maybe that's a thing. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know, but they do understand that she could relapse at any time, and they're adjusting to life without Beata, which is very not easy. Enter reporter Daphne Chen at this point. So basically, before Daphne Chen gets involved, the story's kind of concluded. Would you agree? Like it kind of seemed like they were maybe going to keep fighting for some things, but they didn't really have as much of a case or anything like that before the report. Maya was free. She was back at home. She's getting treatment, not the treatment that they felt that she needed, but she was getting treatment and she was starting to get better. So story is kind of wrapped up. Daphne Chen decides to publish a piece about the Kowalski story, and she digs into the people involved, such as Dr. Sally Smith, Kathy Beatty, all of the people at the hospital, and she puts it all out there about what happened. Well, sure as shit, the calls start coming in. The emails start flooding her with very similar situations. People who had their children taken away, people who are still in prison for medical child abuse that they did not commit. And what all of these families had in common was what? Sally Smith and Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. Every one of the stories that rolled in said, that was the doctor who put me out, and that was the hospital we were in. Talk about terrifying. Families come in looking for help. This was a Daphne Chen quote. Families who come in looking for help, and they often walk out in handcuffs. I mean, you walk in to get help for the child that you love, and you get accused of something. That's so fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
After all,
well, and what is she out of? Like, what is she getting out of it? If she's not making money, she doesn't have kind of business on the side. What do you get out of separating families except some sort of sick sort of joy? It doesn't make any sense. No part of that makes sense to me.
Me neither. If it was all coming from different places around the world or around the country or whatever, then it's like, okay, well, I can understand maybe if you're looking at these things and it's more of more of a procedural thing, or it's more of a, what are your policies that are being, then how can we adjust those, because this is a problem. It's coming from one place and one person. Mm-hmm. Not to say that that's the only time it's ever happened in the country or in the world, but these stories,
the amount of cases just from there.
Right. It's insane. And at this point, after hearing this news, Jack's tired of being quiet. He says, hearing all these families who were affected, he decides to act the way Beata would have acted, and he decides to fight hard. He goes and gets a kick-ass group of attorneys together. They start pushing to sue. This is where all that documentation that Beata was taking came in real handy, because they had the true story from beginning to end, timelined out for them, and no one can really challenge it because they already had every bit of information there, right? Also, because they knew she was right about her daughter's condition, because she knew that she was right, Beata never agreed to a case plan. So I'd never heard of a case plan before this. Were you guys familiar with any of that before?
A little bit.
A little bit. So basically, a case plan is a checklist of things that you agree to do as a parent in order to get your child back. Okay. Things like you have to attend an anger management class, or you have to go to couples therapy and blah, 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 blah. You have to do all these things. You have to check in so often, whatever it may be. But what's probably in the small print in that thing that you sign, you're releasing the hospital from any liability. So
that's the part.
Right. That's the best part, right? The real good juicy part of the document. So most families, a lot of families do that, pretty much right away, because it's the easiest, quickest step to getting your children back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll go to an anger management course if that means that I get my child back. Man, it'd be hard not to sign that.
Yeah.
Even if it says, well, you're also saying you can't hold us liable. It's like, well, the important part here isn't getting rich off of you making a fuck up. It's about getting my child back. Right. But Beata didn't do it. She never did that because she was so convinced, I am not going to make you not liable, because you are liable for this bullshit. Now, whether that was the right choice or not, I don't know. We don't know what kind of case plan was ever presented to her, if she even had the option to sign one, because we never heard any story about them saying, here, you can have Maya back if you sign this case plan. You think that they would have mentioned that in this if they were, but the truth of the matter is she didn't sign one. She never signed one. So they can sue. And during this process, they find a huge piece of evidence to put against the hospital and these nurses. They uncover invoices. So, Katie, you've worked in finance and billing before. It all comes back to the numbers, right? Where money is.
Yep.
And
the money doesn't lie. The numbers don't lie.
Right. And what they did, so Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital billed the family for 3 months of treatment for CRPS, meaning that this disorder that Dr. Sally Smith told the courts that Maya didn't have was being treated for at the same hospital she was being held. So what you're saying is she did have it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's poking.
Actively treated for that they were denying. So
Exactly.
In court, you can't say that she didn't have it if you were actively treating her for it.
Exactly.
It's just, it doesn't add up.
So
you can't win it.
So you're either billing them for something that didn't really happen, or which
would go to jail for.
Right. Or you lied on the under oath saying that she didn't have something that you knew she did have. So either way,
right.
it's poking all kinds of holes in her. What'd you say?
I said they're fucked. Either way, they're fucked.
Yep.
There's no way out.
Yep. However, after all of this, we find out that the court case keeps getting pushed because the Second District Court of Appeals has to decide whether or not they're going to allow punitive damages in the case. And until they do that, the case is indefinitely postponed. So basically what that means is red tape. It's tied up in red tape. People are pushing to say, it's just being held indefinitely. And they keep getting told, we're not going to choose a jury. We're not going to push for a trial, because at this point, we don't even know what all is going to be used in this trial, right?
And when they say punitive, I'm pretty sure they're talking about emotional pain, things that are hard to quantify. And they knew they were going to have to pay through the nose through punitive damages.
All day.
Yeah.
And, but judges kept saying, we're not going forward with trial until we know what's going to be on the trial. And which, I guess makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's legalese. It's red tape. It's tied up in the muck, And one thing I want to kind of, we're getting toward the end of the story itself. One part that really was powerful to me was a letter that Maya wrote for her mom. I want to play that real quick.
I want to speak, but I can't without crying. I hate crying.
It's okay if you have to cry. It's normal. You have to speak for yourself now because mommy is not there. Just close your eyes and pretend I'm there. I know it's not the same, but just be strong.
If you're watching this, Mommy, I want you to know that I love you. Send you kisses. You'll know it's from me.
Dear Mom, saying that life has felt fucked up since you left is probably the biggest understatement I could make. Dad, Kyle, and I have all had to adapt to your absence. Dad distracts himself by helping the neighbors with painting projects. Kyle does his best to escape by fishing for hours. When pouring all my energy into my schoolwork got to be too exhausting, I started to book every second of my free time with friends, outside of the house and away from reminders. But as soon as we step foot into our home, we are brought back to reality. We miss you. I miss you. For 5 years, we have been promised our trial. Yet it seems that the closer we get to a set date, the further it gets pushed. Even though we are discouraged, we will not settle. We will fight for you, and we will fight for the thousands of other families who find themselves in the same unfortunate circumstances. Our day will come. I love you.
So I thought it was really cool, the filmmakers taking audio from Beata through all of the phone calls and things like that and putting it into the final kind of scene of Maya talking to her mom. When Maya says, I want to talk, but I can't talk without crying, and I hate crying. She's cried out. You know, we didn't talk about it much, but when she freaks out during her deposition, saying, "How dare you ask me why I don't like hospitals and doctors? Mm-hmm. You did this to me. Your system did this to me." You know, and you know she's tired of crying, and they splice her mom's voice in, saying it's okay to cry. God, to pull on my heartstrings already, because you know, right? Katie's over there, a ball of tears already. You know, but it's kind of where, you know, we get a little bit of information toward the end, but it's kind of where we leave off with them saying, we're going to keep fighting, Mom. You know, we're going to do what you would do, and the best that we can. You know, we get an update at the end. The Second District Court of Appeals has decided to approve the Kowalskis' request to pursue punitive damages against the hospital, and the court date is set to September 11th, 2023. At the time of the court date, it will have been 2,530 days since Maya entered the hospital and the last time she saw her mother. It should also be noted that in December of 2021, Dr. Sally Shithead and she settled her portion of the lawsuit with the Kowalskis for $2.5 million and declined to interview on this documentary. Smith never faced any formal professional consequences for what happened with the Kowalski family. However, she did retire in the summer of 2023. According to the cut and
did you have her license revoked for some reason?
Say that again.
She did not have her medical license revoked.
Nope. According to the Cut and Women's Health magazine, an attorney for John Hopkins says that, quote, Dr. Smith is a very competent, very professional, and very valued member of our medical staff. She is an independent pediatrician who is on our staff as a consultant and an admitting physician. But in the same breath, he reiterates that Smith has never been an official employee of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. No, she was able to retire, kind of go off the grid. She paid $2.5 million in a settlement to the Kowalski family, and that's it. That's it. Since this documentary was released before the court date, our show happens after the court date, and I went ahead and I looked up what happened, and a jury found the hospital guilty of false imprisonment and battery of Maya, as well as fraudulent billing of her father, Jack, which I'm assuming is the charges for the CRPS.
Yeah. Yeah, that's got to be an easy decision there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And inflicting emotional distress on her mother, Beata, which led to her death. They were awarded $261 million, which doesn't bring your mom back, but I am glad that had to have hurt. They had to have felt that. I wish it had been more, of course, but at least it wasn't like, here's $100,000, go do your thing. It's like, this is, a significant amount of money because you went through a significant amount of, maybe there's people out there, maybe you guys disagree with that. How do you guys feel about that, that verdict and that sentencing?
No amount of money is going to bring her mom back.
Yep.
Or that time that she was locked up there for no reason.
Right.
So, if anything.
Yeah. Katie, what are your thoughts on that decision?
Same as Brice. These insurance companies prop up these hospitals with billions of dollars.
Yep.
So I don't think 261 was nearly enough. They should have gotten close to $1 billion for imprisoning a child. And at least the jury determined that the abuse and emotional damage done to her mother was done by the hospital and led to her suicide. That's a big admission of guilt to get in. But based on all the money the hospital has, it probably didn't even make a dent.
Yeah, you're right.
I think they just had to cause pain because of the pain that they cause, and nothing's really going to make that better. But I remember watching the clip of Maya and her brother looking at the jurors, and they each stood up and said guilty, and that was pretty emotional for them. And I'm just going to get emotional again.
Yeah,
but they did what they could, and they got what they could, and they got the hospital to admit guilt, and that's a really big deal, and it'll be a high precedent as people move forward, and especially in that town for other families that were treated that way. They're likely to get more money because based on that precedence.
The thing that disappoints me the most, like I agree, there's no 100%, there's no amount of money that makes the pain go away. There's no amount of money that, this is not an amount of money that truly hurts an organization like Johns Hopkins, I'm sure. But the thing that probably disappoints me the most out of all of this is that nobody was held accountable. What do you call it? Personally. There, nobody had to truly. I would have very much liked to see somebody go to prison, even if it was just for a little while, a couple years. Even if they said you did your job the best you could, but you really fucked up, so you got to answer for that. You're going to show them that you give a fuck about that. You're going to show other doctors who may be taking their position too lightly and not covering the gray area that Sally Smith admitted to overlooking. And you're going to make people start taking their job a lot more seriously if you're not being so protected in your position that you can fuck up as much and as often as you want and still go get your paycheck the next day.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the most disappointing part.
I'm sorry.
No.
I was just thinking about Scrubs. Not Dr. Kelso, the guy above him, he's like the hospital administrator or something.
Yeah.
He makes all the top down decisions. So he's responsible for everyone. So who's that at that hospital?
Right.
That person should be the face of this case and should be the one that should get prison time, or at least some kind of face that they can put on the newspaper and say, this man is responsible for what happened here because he signed all of those invoices and he told every doctor that they could continue to hold Maya against her will, and that this certainly wasn't CRPS, and it doesn't matter what the previous doctor did or diagnosed or what kind of treatments he had. This man signed off on it. Surely there is someone like that at the hospital.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's a big hospital. Of course there is. Yep. One interesting thing about the final trial that happened earlier this year, the hospital's attorneys are looking for a retrial after a claim that a member of the jury leaked information about the case to his wife, who then interfered with the trial by posting inside information on social media. So to me, it's a last ditch grab to try to get something, but the result's not going to be any different. You're going to get, even if they granted a retrial, which they won't. I mean, I guess I don't know that, but I doubt that they will. You're still going to have the same trial. You're still going to have the same information. You're just going to have, you just had a juror who didn't do what he was supposed to do, and you're grasping at straws at that point, is my opinion. But it's a little something that was interesting anyway. Okay, that's the documentary, folks. Katie, how do you feel after watching that?
I feel very lucky. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. I'm just lucky that didn't happen to me. I think it's called Schadenfreude, when you're glad that something didn't happen to you.
Okay.
And I'm glad family got money at least to, they'll never have to worry about healthcare ever again. I mean, they'll worry about who they're going to, but they won't worry about having to pay for it.
Yep.
So that's something, but also hopefully that this has given enough press, at least in that town and that hospital, that more people can come forward with their cases and have them heard and maybe get some justice the same way that that family did.
Yep. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing, Maya as a maybe a face for this sort of situation and become an advocate for those sort of things, or her dad, Jack, or brother, or something like that. Brice, how about you? How are you feeling after the credits roll, or while they're rolling?
Oh man, big sad.
Yep.
Because it starts out, you have this beautiful montage of this family, and then this whole documentary, and then it ends with sort of this montage of all these other families that are locked up and having their kids taken away, and it's like, this is not a single case. It is so much more.
Yep.
And that leaves you with a certain feeling of,
yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't feel great when credits rolled. Like at that point, I hadn't looked up the results of the case yet either, or the trial, I should say. And I mean, I'm glad to know that the trial happened and that the Kowalskis won the trial. And how heartbreaking would it have been if they had their trial and there was no guilt given to the hospital at all, and no admission of any of that. When with Dr. Sally Smith settling, it's like you kind of know that you don't have a leg to stand on, so you settle, and and it is what it is. But holy shit, this was a sad one. This is, I think probably top sad, and from what we've watched, it's scary. If you have kids, be careful. If you are a kid, be careful. It's just so many things that in the world that we have to be cautious of, and it's disheartening, and it's tiresome, and it's it's scary. So, should we rate the thing?
Let's rate it.
Let's rate this thing. Finally, we've come to the time where we need to rate this documentary with an official documentary rating. Each crew member scores the documentary on a scale of 1 to 10 items, with 1 being as bad as Dr. Sally Smith and 10 being as great as a news article that cracks open the truth about the monsters in our systems. The item that is used for scoring changes each week depending on the content of the documentary that we watched. This week, we will be using ketamine doses as our rating item. So let's start with Katy. Katy, how many ketamine doses do you give Take Care of Maya?
I give 8 ketamine doses.
8 ketamine doses. So despite all of the sad subject matter, you thought this was a very good documentary worth 8.
This is probably one of the best that we've ever watched, if not the best. I don't know if this is the highest rating that I've given, but
yeah.
I mean, not only do we have the emotional factor, but there's also just very good reporting. And we're so lucky that they were so good at documenting. Beata was so good at documenting everything that was happening that we were able to follow it so closely and to watch it unfold after her death when they could take it to court and say, guess what? We've got you. We have everything. And then find out that the invoices all said CRPS. It was just, it was justice. It felt like justice, at least in some way.
Yep. I agree. Thanks, Katy. Brice, how many ketamine doses, sir?
I too am giving it 8 ketamine doses.
8 whole shots of ketamine.
Yep.
Tell me why.
I learned a lot. And it was a very good documentary. It leaves you questioning things, and so it's not a perfect 10, but it's dang good, and I learned a lot.
Yep, agreed. I also gave this 8 ketamine doses. Similar to you guys, in order to get a 10, I have to walk away feeling pretty good, feeling pretty empowered, feeling pretty inspired. It's hard for me to want to give something that leaves me feeling so sad a 10 or a 9, just because, I don't love that we have to watch a documentary about this because it's a thing. But in the world of documenting what's happening and telling us in a compelling way of what some of the dangers are in our systems, I mean, documentaries are the vehicle that can do that in a way that keeps us interested, keeps us engaged. And this one did all of those things. It told a good story. Was it biased? Yeah, it was. It was not made in it didn't give the hospital side much of a positive light or try to give their story. It did, if you're watching, you do understand some of those things, but I don't, it was a biased documentary for sure.
When the other side defers to say anything, that's kind of
agreed. Yep. When all they said at the end was, we take everything very seriously, and we feel that we did the best that we could with what we knew. Well, if you're just like you said, if you're not saying anything, if you decline to say anything, well, then I'm going to tell the story of the people who did. And chances are that's going to be more close to accurate anyway. So 8 ketamine doses. So after averaging everyone's scores together, the official documentary rating for Take Care of Maya. Okay, so 8 ketamine doses, if I'm doing my math correctly. Thank you all for listening. It's always a good time, even if the subject matter isn't the most uplifting and encouraging. I still like talking to you guys about it. And I also like hanging out with Brice and Katy. So thanks, guys. For Katy, I'm glad you were able to tune in over the internet since you're not in town. So thanks for being here. Brice, thanks.
It was a joy. Yep. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Okay, true believers, shall we talk about next week's episode? Yeah. A wise man once said, quote, "With great power, there must also come great responsibility," unquote. So it's time to put on your gold and red armor, grab your web shooters and assemble to see if you are worthy to lift the mighty Mjolnir, because for our 50th episode, I am taking us into the world of something very near and dear to my heart. That is right, the world of Marvel comic books. We are going to be looking into 100 years of influence by one of the godfathers of comic books and the creator of some of the biggest characters ever to grace comics, cartoons, movies, toys, and so much more. We'll be watching a 1 hour and 26-minute documentary called Stan Lee. You guys comic book fans at all? Marvel fans? Anything like that?
I love the movies.
Yeah? Katie?
Yep. Movies. Yep.
Yeah. So so my dad got me into comic books when I was very, very young, and he and I are both still very into them. When the Marvel Cinematic Universe became a thing, I was very, very into that, seeing those characters turn into big screen icons and just start to grow. And to me, this is wonderful. I love Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and everything that they came up with, some of the most iconic characters that we have in our media today. So Disney Plus comes out with a Stan Lee documentary, and I go bingo. I go Excelsior, because that is what we are going to watch. So go check out Stan Lee before next week's episode. It can be streamed, like I said, on Disney Plus. As I said at the beginning of our show, rate and review our podcast. Follow us on all the stuff. Next week, join us as we Excelsior, one documentary at a time. On behalf of Lady Katy, hi Katy. On behalf of Bruce,
yep,
hi Bruce. Matt and DJ in that post-production booth, and the entire Talkumentary family. I am your host, Jeff Kowalski. I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you keep your minds open and be kind to each other, and be careful when you go to the hospital, because you never know. So, all right. Bye, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to Talkumentary Secret Trivia. If you've been listening to the quiet after our episode for this long, it's time for a little secret trivia. The subject matter of this week's episode was a little bit sad, but Katie mentioned the show Scrubs. So guess what? We're going to do a Scrubs trivia. We've got a couple questions for you here, pulled off of funtrivia.com. Let's see. I don't know this show as well as you guys seem to, so I don't know if these are hard or easy, but here we go. Number one, who is the actor that plays Chris Turk? Anyone?
Shit, I don't know. Can't think of his name.
He also does a voice.
So Zach Braff plays JD.
Yep.
John C. McGinley plays Dr. Cox, and Neil Flynn plays the janitor. Chris Turk is played by... Last chance.
He was also in Clueless.
Donald Faison.
Oh my God, we saw that name for so many years. God, Donald.
Okay, let's see.
It was just a phase on.
Just a phase on.
Yep.
Why is there silverware in the pancake drawer?
Why is there pancakes in the silverware drawer?
Okay, where did JD grow up?
I don't know if he ever did.
Good point.
I want to say Oregon.
You have the first letter of the state correct, but not the state.
Ohio.
Yeah, Troutwood, Ohio. Yep. In season 4, episode 2, JD makes friends with a furniture moving company worker, and the worker has a very strange knowledge of JD's early years, including his hometown. Okay. Do you know who sings the main theme from Scrubs?
I did at one point, but no.
No, I don't know.
Laszlo Bane.
Dang.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see.
Way to go, Laszlo.
A couple more here. John Ritter, star of Three's Company, appeared on Scrubs as a relative of JD. How was he related?
Brother?
Uncle. Right?
Neither of you are correct.
Dad. It was his dad.
It was his dad. Yep. This was one of John Ritter's last appearances before his passing. His appearance reminded JD that great things can come from humble beginnings, and JD himself became a doctor thanks to his father's hard work as a salesman. Okay, let's do one more.
Yes, he was.
Who said the line, "If I find a penny in there, I'm taking you down"?
That's the janitor.
The janitor.
This quote was from the pilot episode titled My First Day. This particular quote happens while JD is waiting outside the door while the janitor is trying to fix it. JD attempts to make small talk but fails, and thus the rivalry begins. This has been another...
And he was also supposed to be imaginary.
Yes.
Until the end of season 1. And then he was so good.
That's awesome. This has been another episode of Talkumentary Secret Trivia. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, be kind to each other, keep those minds open, and do all the cool shit that you want to do in your life. We love you, and have a good night. Bye, everybody.